supported by the Apostle Islands Historic Preservation Conservancy. And I'm going to read this because I've got too many HPC people here, and if I get it wrong, I'll be in trouble. AIHPC supports the preservation and interpretation of historic structures and cultural landscapes in the Apostle Islands region. And they have been very supportive of our efforts here at BHA and very supportive of the programs that have been put together here through Bob Nelson, who is the maestro of all these programs that we present here today. And I can't tell you, it just is so great to see all you people here on a February afternoon. And so without any more talking about BHA or whatever, you're all here to hear about Madeline Island Ferry Line. We'll start out with Bob Nelson, who will start with the early history of transportation across the bay from Bayfield to the island. And that would be about the 1890 era in through the 1970s, at which point Garrett Russell will take over and proceed to the present day. So thank you all again. So Bob.
Hey, thank you everybody for showing up on this beautiful day in February. It's just a great pleasure to be here. I know the crowd has warmed up a little bit because of the good words put out by Marilyn Van Sant, and we're going to shoot off into a little different world here with the ferry boating of this era. And I just thought I'd lead off with a little photo here from Frank Leslie's newspaper. This was in 1877, and that was a concept of this whole area at that point in time. You see Bayfield up in here, there's a little town named Salmon, Houghton Point, Ashland, whoop. I'm all thumbs. I've done this for a while. Ashland, and of course LaPointe, the great city of LaPointe, on the historically famous Madeline Island. I want to just go over some informational sources here. These are the families of the Madeline Island Ferry Line helped us. It was Robin and Gary, and Sherry Peterson actually did a lot of the footwork and history of that organization and all those things. Bill Bover again, and I did a little bit myself. Bill is our archivist here, and he's a magnificent addition to this whole operation. I start out here with a little tribute. Again, I want to thank Gary and Robin for everything. This presentation is in two parts, and the first part is mine. And I'm going to go from about 1897 to about 1970, where the culmination of Howard Russell's ferry line and Harry Nelson's Nichevo ferry line kind of came together as one unit. And Gary will talk more about that. But before I get to there, I want to do a little tribute to somebody that some people that I really think were some of the key people that made me a little bit what I am. I want you to know that some things in life, you never forget. One of them is your first job, real job, summer job. And the other is when the company's owners are just super nice to a young kid. So, shortly in this tribute, I will introduce you briefly to the two finest people that I believe graced the pristine waters of LaPointe at Madeline Island. Just some wonderful people. So I'm going to take you back to the spring of 1964. I'm a 13-year-old kid, barely off my bicycle, just out of the berry patch, and I'm looking. My dad came up to me, who had started working, my dad, Julian Nelson, he started working for Howard in 1962, and he said to me, "You're going to have to get a job now, you're old enough." So I was fortunate enough to go down to the dock, and I got to meet Howard Russell, and for some reason he said, "Okay, kid, hey Bob, get on the boat, you're going to work with us." So, and I got to work with Howard, and at that, Gary was a captain, a young aspiring captain at that time, and my dad. And I had a great 5 years there. I worked 5 summers, and the summer of 1969, when I was 17, I'd already worked 4 years, and or 3 years, and they told Howard that I was no longer old enough. I needed to be 18 years old to work on the Great Lakes, and so Howard said, "Okay, Bob, he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. We're gonna build the dockside, you can work with Ellen, you can cut grass for Aunt Margaret, and you can, paint my garage and all that stuff. So I look back at Howard Russell as one of my favorite people of all times, and Ellen too. This photo comes back to me. This is the days that I remember. This is circa 1957, and the young kid that's right here on the back of the GarHow, I never did get it straight how to say it, Gary. I always call it the GarHow, is Gary himself, and he's kind of looking back, and I think this is my old friend Mel Stalline, and up in the pilot house, I'm sure it's Howard or somebody, but Gary's in 67 was probably deckhand at that time. And when I looked at this photo, I kind of almost broke down because I remember looking at these, standing in the same spot in 1964 in that back deck, right by that knee-high tide post, looking down at the waters that you see there, the swirl. I can still see those bubbles. I can still see the parked cars, the old 60 vintage parked cars, the people up on the upper deck there next to the life preserver, and they're looking down, and they're leaving Madeline Island, and I remember these huge wooden planks. They were so heavy for me at the time, and underneath these cars were these huge blocks that kept the cars from rolling a little bit. So I had a great time reminiscing on this photo. I also remember, those are the beautiful things I remember, kind of the romantic things, but actually my technical job description was, I actually got to help people guide cars up and onto the boat and throw those planks around a little bit. But I also got to sweep the decks. I got to wipe the oil off the deck. Remember how every car seemed to leak, and Howard would say, Bub, hey Bub, go get a rag. Wipe that up, please. Hey Bub, this or that. And they'd say, and then another part of my job was I would spend some time, I had to wash all the windows of that once a week, and I had the dubious task of actually, I was on the toilet patrol, so I always had the job of that type of work. And to that, some of the greatest jobs you can ever have in your life for a kid, almost Huckleberry Finish, was me working with Howard Russell. On that boat with Gary, and the likes of the kids like Mike Nelson, and there's just a whole barrage of kids, Mike Nelson, and another Mike Nelson, Tom Linnell. There's a whole pile of guys. There's Nelsons everywhere in those days. But anyway, that was what I got to do as a kid. And how fortunate can a kid get to go from a berry patch to work with great people like that? So at this point in time, I want to show you two people who, to the guy I will probably idolize. That's Howard and Ellen. So think of them as some of the greatest people I ever met. Now I'm going to get into the Bayfield to LaPointe ferry boating people and the transport business. I'm going to go from about 1897 until 1970. I want to start here. If you were on Grants Point, Madeline Island, circa 1898, that Mackinac on the beach would have been there. This is down on the point where Ted Gary and the Woods family and that whole group of people had access to View Bayfield. That would have been Grants Point. And I'll kind of give you a panorama of what it would look like if you're in the particular boating business, going back and forth from Bayfield to Madeline Island. Can you hear me back there okay?
Yes, sir.
Need volume up?
No, you're good.
Okay. Ferry boat transportation has a rich history in the Chequamegon Bay area on the exterior South Shore. This is that South Shore, as you can see, right open here, the whole South Shore, all the way from the islands down to probably Washburn. You should know that I want to start with this period in time. If you go prior to that, there was a period of time when they had the steamboats and stuff like that were going in and out to Ashland and in that area. Washburn, Bayfield, Houghton Point, all the way down the South Shore. But I'm going to go from LaPointe to Bayfield. And here's a photo of a boat owned by Captain John Angus. It was about circa 1910. The photo was taken by Hamilton Nelson Ross on the island. And that's a Lizzie W. It was a boat that transported just people back and forth around the bay from here to Bayfield and back. And Captain Angus, he was here in the 1850s and 60s, and he had another boat named the Jane he started out with, but I happen to have this photo. And I thought I'd show that people were running back and forth through those years. It was named the Lizzie W, and that was for Frederick Woods' wife. Her name is Elizabeth Woods, and that's the Lizzie, or that's the Lizzie W. LaPointe was the center at that time of the government of this area. Earlier than that, of commerce and shipping, and that it had a half a century early been there. People were traveling to it in ever increasing numbers, and so the people from Bayfield, when they come to Bayfield and across on that particular sailboat. In 1898, Ed Salmon came to the area, and he got started over at LaPointe at the old mission. And a lot of people came up here to visit there from Bayfield. So you can see that it was quite a nice place. Mission cottages are still there. They were built right around 1901. You can see it was a playground for the people that had a few dollars and liked to spend their time there. This is a nicer photo of it. You see the long dock and another short dock up in here. Again, you can see the old Protestant church up on the hill, the mission, and just a couple of the cottages are into place, whereas you see three here. So this is probably a little bit more recent shot, maybe a year or two later, and this is an older shot, and those are compliments. This one's a compliment of the Wisconsin Historical Society. It was during that period of time that Madeline Island served as a location for some spectacular picnics and goings-on like that. So on an incredible Sunday in 1895, some 2,000 people actually from the local communities attended a picnic at LaPointe that was organized by them, the Catholic Order of Foresters. I've never heard of that before, but there was a Catholic Order of Foresters. The newspaper reported that an immense crowd was transferred to the island by the Plowboy, Fashion, Liberty, and the large Keystone Lumber Company scow. And a pretty sight it was that the boat that left the commercial dock with three bands playing sweet music, and these 2,000 delight excursionists were shouting their approval. So the transport boats in the area in that period of time, which is kind of fun, is the Plowboy, which we just mentioned, and the Fashion. So there they are in under full steam, and I'm not quite sure where the Fashion is here, but this is from the Jim and Marge Miller collection, and the Plowboy is the State of Wisconsin Historical Society collection. So these two boats were at least part of the group that went night and day to bring people over to Madeline Island to have a picnic, enjoy the swimming, and all the fun things that could be had right down at the old mission and throughout the whole island. Then comes along a guy by the name of John Cask, a Bayfield who commanded a 35-foot steam yacht called the Sylph. Don't have a photo of that, but she was 35 feet long, and he did the same thing. In 1901, Captain Cask purchased a 35-foot naphtha launch in St. Paul, Minnesota, and brought her home to run on the LaPointe to Bayfield run, and he christened her the Eva, and the Eva was named for his daughter. He was also a Civil War vet. Captain Cask was at Michigan Island as a lighthouse keeper. He also was at Andersonville. He was a prisoner of war in Andersonville, and he had high commendations when he came to this area, and he ran the Eva. Now begins the fun part for me. Got the stuff behind. This gentleman here is C.J. Russell, and he came to the area in about 1875 to 1880. He landed on Madeline Island, and his brother was there by the name of R.J. Russell. I never did get R.J.'s first name. What was it, Gary? Richard Russell, and they were at Russell Bay, to which Russell Bay is named after RJ. Anyway, RJ Russell was the logger and the lumber camp type of guy. He had a little mill there. And Charlie Russell, who is the father of Howard Russell, who I kind of showed you a few minutes ago, and the grandfather of Gary Russell. So here he's on his boat, the Idora. And he's got people, and he was en route. He had a mail run and a little bit of hauling passengers and freight and stuff back and forth to Madeline Island. And that's Captain Russell right there. I don't know if they had papers in those days, but he was in charge of the whole operation there. And that's Gary's grandfather. There's a photo of the Idora. Being on this board here allows me a lot of fun in that I can go through the old newspapers downstairs, and I happened to see this one. This one right, well, come on. The Idora, this is in 1903. He ran an ad in the paper, and I think he really started the operation to the island right around 1901 and 1902. But here you leave the old mission dock, which he's at right here. And this is part of that too. This is the Idora. And you leave the LaPointe dock at 7:40, the old mission at 7:30, the LaPointe dock at 7:40, and the Bayfield City dock at 8:30 in the morning. So he'd go over and back, and then he'd make his run back to the island. And the last runs were leave the old mission at 4, leave the Bayfield City dock, and head her to Madeline Island at 5:50. And if you weren't on that boat at that time, you were out of luck. So anyway, that's a really nice photo. Again, a Wisconsin photo, Historical Society photo, number 3374. And that kind of shows you a little bit about the timetables and that run. If he was, part of that run would have been to the old LaPointe dock. And you know the fancy, really nice steel piling dock you have at LaPointe right now. Nice tide posts. The ferry boats got these massive little places where they can put their ramps up and down on it. Those type of things. Wasn't that way in those days, because when the Lizzie W and a whole pile of other people came to the LaPointe dock, it looked similar to this. Again, we got to thank Hamilton Nelson Ross in the state of Wisconsin for this photo. You can see. I think the old Angus building is way over here, that type of thing. And then they would come back to Bayfield. Now, I'm not sure which quote this is right here, but it'd be back to the old city dock, and this was circa 1910. So Bayfield City Dock in those days looked like that. Back from Madeline Island they'd go, over to Bayfield, back to Madeline Island, and so forth, about four times a day in those days. Kind of fun little car. I don't think that they put a car on it Mondays, but the intentions were things are going to change pretty quickly. There were some other boats that came in between that run. There was a boat named the Corsair, and that was a small boat that came from Bayfield to LaPointe. That was owned and operated by a guy by the name of William Johnson. And the boat was built at LaPointe by Ed Valley. A lot of the people in the Bayfield Maritime Museum here might recognize that name as one of the boat builders, along with John Peterson. By 1940, the ferry routes began to disappear, and only Bayfield and Madeline Island were linked by this ferry service. So prior to that, they were still running some lines down to Washburn and Ashland, back and forth. But by that time, most of that type of transport was done, and they all came to Bayfield. And in the 1920s, a gentleman by the name of Captain Seeberger began operating the first ferry boat built specifically for carrying an automobile, one per trip, and it was christened the Chinook. And this is a 47-foot boat built by John Peterson. This is a later shot when Ernie LaPointe owned it. He evidently, it was sold by Captain Seeberger to Bayfield Fish Company, and Bayfield Fish Company went broke, and then Ernie LaPointe picked up the rig, and in the old days, it had the back of it there was open and it could carry a car in the back. And this happens to be in herring season, the only photo I could find of it. But that was a Chinook. In 1936, Captain Seeberger had a boat named the Detroit. And he used that to haul people back and forth. She was quite a nice boat. You can see that she was probably 70-some feet long. And she was here during the World War II era, and her actual home port was Duluth, Minnesota. And she operated on Superior, Lake Superior as a pickup vessel for the Hans Christensen and Sons Fish Company a little bit later out of Duluth. But she was actually in the waters here, and as you can see the name Captain Seeberger on the bottom in Bayfield, Wisconsin. That came from a postcard of her. About the same time, a gentleman by the name of Jim Fuller operated a wooden passenger ferry called the Bing. Bing. That's the Bing. And as you can see, she's quite a beautiful little boat. Look at the nice lines on her. Just gorgeous. Little cabin up here, and these little, you can see the canvas is folded down here for colder weather, windy weather. I'm pretty sure she's over at LaPointe. That looks like Grant's Point would sneak out behind there a little bit. But that's that Madeline, and there she is doing some loading of some type. I don't see a car on her, but she was one of the first boats that came out of there. Not long after the appearance of the Chinook, Jim Fuller had another boat built, and this is the Bing 2. And I remember Howard talking that boat, the Bing, all the time. We'd sit up in the pilot house, we're talking football or astronaut doctors or Bayfield basketball or something. Then he'd recall the days of the Bing 2. And that's a boat that Howard remembered very, very well. And you can see the Nellwood right here. That was the Woods family boat at LaPointe in the old days. So that was the big boat that they took the President of the United States to Devil's Island and all over the place. They were cahoots. They were good friends of one another. And President Coolidge. Now here we get into a different period of time. A little bit later is the Bing 2. This is when Howard had it. And to which he spoke of. And I don't know if you can see him up there, Gary, or not. He's probably in the wheelhouse. It's a nice photo of the, one of the earlier ferry boats in Bayfield. And I imagine, remember those big wood planks we had, loading the boat up on that? They were actually probably built on the island by, was it Leonard Erickson built them, or there was a whole pile of people that built them. Anyway, they'd load them up and take that one car over. That's Captain Russell's Bing 2. I wanted to throw this one in because not everything was hauled across the water, including the mail. This is a nice photo of Gary's grandmother here, Graham Johnson, Ellen and Howard Russell, and here the winter transportation. There weren't snowmobiles and there weren't wind sleds in those days, and there wasn't a lot going on other than dog sleds. And here Howard and Ellen and the group have a load of parcels ready to go to Bayfield, and there could be mail in that bag. I remember the old mail bags on the GarHow there. They hadn't changed much over the years. Are they still using the bags, Gary? Anyway, that's a nice photo of Madeline. And I wanted to show the dogs up there. It's the only one I could see partially a dog. But anyway, off they'd go to Bayfield. So I threw that one in there just to let you know that it just wasn't always over the water. They did all this work on land too. That's a shot of Bayfield Harbor in the 1940s. And the spot right here now is where the Madeline Island Ferry Line is at these days. You can see that they had the L in the dock. This is after 1937 because Works Progress Association people built this dock. You can see the fish boats and all that stuff. Here's the skating rink, and this is little Henry Johnson's fish house, and this is the old Booth Fisheries building area down here, which Madeline Island Ferry Line later purchased. Here's the north dock, or the Vaughan dock, and this is the Dalrymple dock, what they call it. And here you can see one of the first old wooden ferry boats there, which was a boat called the Nichevo 1. And it was a wooden ferry boat, and the word Nichevo is a word in Russian which means no matter. So whatever it was, Mr. Seeberger called it the Nichevo, which meant no matter. So anyway, she was 14 foot of beam, and she was powered by a 45 horse Fairbanks Morse diesel engine. She made a whopping 10 miles an hour, and like the Bing 2, she could carry 2 cars at a time. The first Nichevo was sold to Frank Forrest of Minneapolis in 1942. So we're right in that time period here, and I just wanted to show you what Bayfield looked like a little bit at that period of time. In 1937 comes another boat. Oh, here's a nice little shot of the Seabird out here. The Seabird is a commercial fish boat. The GarHow, GarHow one, which I'll get into in a minute. And this is the first little Nich, the wooden Nichevo that ran that route in those days. In 1937, there's another nice little photo I'm getting ahead. Here's a nice photo of Howard in the wheelhouse of the old GarHow here. Circa that period of time, you can see the Coast Guard cutter behind it. And these huge wooden planks, which I told you about, which left me with calluses and blistered till I still got a couple from there. This is where she's tied up, and that's Captain Russell and my old chum Howard Russell on the big wheel of this particular GarHow. Okay? Now I can get to 1937. In 1937, the Faithful, which a 64.5 foot vessel, was put into service by the Russell brothers, Jimmy and Howard, it says. The boat was used to assist, at that time, the Bing 2 in ferry service during periods of heavy traffic. The Faithful was powered by a 4-cylinder Collenberg engine, diesel engine, and the rear deck had been rebuilt to accommodate an automobile. She was used as a ferry until 1939, when she went to work in a logging operation on Bear Island, hauling up logs. Howard was actually in the logging business too, and he was hauling logs with her at that time. Howard Russell, that is. The Faithful was later sold to the Lullaby Furniture Company, and during World War II she was put to work in the logging operations on Outer Island. So that's the years that Lullaby was logging Outer Island. For their veneer factory which they used that veneer to make warplanes in those days. The Faithful was eventually scuttled, and her permanent home now is on the Sandpoint of Outer Island, where the company left her there to posterity. And to you people of the United States, you own her right now. She's on the beach in bad condition. A couple nice shots of her. Kind of an interesting boat. This is a photo of about 1942, and you see Howard on the back here. Here she's tugging this boat. Well, what she's doing here is, that was the flood, the July flood of 1942, and they brought her to Bayfield to help clean out the harbors. Some of the boats were high and dry, and here she's just tugging on a boat, to which I don't know for sure which one it is. It almost looks like the steel boat, like the William G, which was a fish boat at that time. She could have been in there just after the war, and during the war, and there she is. Here's another nice photo of her at the city dock, flag flying, and ready to make a run. You can see where she could just probably barely put a car on the back of that boat, but she's ready to take off. The Faithful. Now, after that point in time, they had the Faithful and they had the GarHow one. In 1939, the Russell brothers, again Howard and Jim, I believe, also acquired a ferry with a 4-car capacity. That was named the GarHow after their son, Howard and Gary. And the boat was built at LaPointe by Emil Larson and Augie Wick. And I remember both those gentlemen really, really well. The GarHow spent her last days in the Wright Boat Yard in Bayfield. But you can see she really had some nice lines I want to say that that's probably Madeline Island's finest gentleman out breaking ice in the spring of the year. A nice shot of her right there. This is kind of fun because it reminds me of some of the people I really thought the world of and got to know them a little bit. This is her. I think she's on the island with a car on her. And she's got Louis Cadot, Emil Erickson, Howard Russell, Augie Wick, and Nels Galeen. Those are fairly famous names on Madeline Island. And they're ready to take her to Bayfield. Is that a Jeep there, a World War II Jeep or something, Gary, maybe? Anyway, they're off and running. And that's the last I remember. This photo was about 1968. The Russell brothers sold the GarHow to Laurie Nurse Jr., who used it for a couple of years as a transportation boat to Rocky Island. Nurse's Air Haven out there, that's the boat that they would take to the island. They have all the people in the back, and Laurie Jr. would give a spiel about the island, similar to what they're doing today. And off they go to Rocky Island, have their lunches with Grace and Laurie out there and back to town. And they held that to about, I want to say 1954, and she wasn't used much after that. But there she is at Hulver Wrighton's old boatyard. And this was 1968. And what's that? Now comes along this idea that Leonard Seeberger died in 1937 after sudden illness, and he's the guy that had the Nichevo built. His son Leonard Jr. carried on the business, and he pioneered the change to the steel-hulled ferry boats in the area. And in 1945, he had a new boat built. Well, I'm going to have to get to the next one to show you that. He had a new boat built, which was the Nichevo, and Gary will get into that one a little bit. The Nichevo is the Nichevo 1, which is a steel boat built. And at that point in time, the Russell boys in 1954 acquired their first steel boat, which was the GarHow. It was designed to carry 7 or 8 cars on it. Okay, and there she is under power. So pretty quickly I'm going to hand the ball over to Gary, but it was quite a boat, and that's the boat that I really spent a lot of time on. I learned to love that boat from looking over the bow down at the water being thrust off on the bow and windows, and I can still remember Tim Schultz and Beth Gazera kissing up front there, and you know, and all those type of things, and little things that we remember, and then the toilets there, of course. This particular boat is kind of like the one I really, really, really love. But anyway, she has a really sad ending. And I want to thank Eric Bono for sending me this information. But the GarHow is now in about 7,000 feet of water. So this is the incident brief. It says, on the morning of February 27, 2008, the Treasure Seeker, she was renamed the Treasure Seeker, a 65-foot diesel-powered pirate ship replica, was being relocated from St. Petersburg, Florida to St. Thomas in the United States Virgin Islands. When it experienced stormy sea conditions near the Provinciales, Turk, and Caicos Islands, and then she went down. A routine crew check early was made available to maintain the vessel, and it was determined that it had a leak in the bilge, and the bilge couldn't be fixed. Okay, that bilge pump could not be fixed. She took on water, and then she went down. And in 7,000 feet of water, so the GarHow, and then the Treasure Seeker, that beautiful little boat built by Schwartz Manufacturing Company, is now in about 7,000 feet of water. I'm going to turn the ball over to Gary. I can't wait to do this presentation again because I'll probably be a little smoother. You know, I haven't done one of these in quite a while, so I'm kind of like a little bit all over the place. And I'm hoping Gary will make me look pretty good by the time he's done. Put a little pressure on you there, Gary, or what? Anyway, that's kind of the story of the early, you know, ferry boating from Bayfield to LaPointe. And it's a wonderful story, a rich history behind it. The Russell family played such a huge role in it. And now to give you a little bit more of an update where we're at from 1970 and present is the one and only Gary Russell of the Russell family Madeline Island Ferry Lines.
Thank you. People hear me in the back, or you would like to? You're good. It's all right.
Does that sound better?
Yeah. Great.
Okay, I'll try to keep with that. I'd like to start out with just a little tribute to Captain Julian Nelson. Recently I received the sad news that my old friend and fellow boat captain, Julian Nelson, had passed away at 100 years old. A lot has been written recently about this amazing man's life. I would just like to touch on the 18 years between 1962 and 1980 that Julian and I worked together operating the ferries between Bayfield and Madeline Island. During the countless hours we spent together in the pilot house, we had the opportunity to discuss the many serious challenges and opportunities facing the area. We also discussed national issues like the Vietnam War and Watergate. Julian always treated people with respect. He had a great sense of humor. He was a visionary, and I learned a lot from him. He will always be remembered as someone who helped make this area a better place to live. And we have a picture of him right there. That picture is with Julian and Gaylord Nelson. I'll give you, just a little bit of background. Bob covered a lot, but to get up to 1970, where the ferry companies merged, this photo was taken in 1954. It was the two boats that the smaller one, the Nichevo, was run by Leonard Seeberger Jr., and the larger one, the GarHow, was run by Howard Russell, my father, and me. These two boats would go on to be the two boats operated initially in 1958 by the Nichevo by Harry Nelson, and the GarHow again by Howard and his family. This picture, Bobby reminds me that was taken in May of 1954, and it was probably one of the coldest Mays that we had up here in the good old days when winters were winters. But that year, that boat made its maiden voyage from Two Rivers, Wisconsin to Bayfield. And I was a high school kid, and I was given the great honor to join these old-timers on there. And two gentlemen that were on there were Jim Miller and Shine Miller, his dad. I think Marge is here, something, not Marge, but daughter is here, Jim's daughter. There were also my dad and a guy named Al Glazin and Leo Katzer and Bart Baker. And we all thought it was going to be a heck of a nice cruise, and so nobody dressed real warm, and we just took off, and it was nice on Lake Michigan, and we stopped at Mackinac Island for a night, and everything was going super, and then we got the weather report. Gale force northwest winds, snow, and So we stuck our nose out of, went down to St. Mary's River, and stuck our nose out into Lake Superior and Whitefish Bay, and that thing just bobbed like a cork, and we said, this is no place for us, and temperatures were dropping, and there was an ore boat anchored out there, I remember, and there was somebody from Bayfield on that ore boat and recognized, saw the name on the side, and they called us and said, hey, how would you like to tie up alongside of us? And you don't have to drop your anchor. So we did. We pulled in alongside the ore boat and spent a couple nights there tied up to an ore boat. And then it finally calmed down. But all the way back, it was, temperatures were probably in the single digits at night. There was no heat on the boat, and I remember sleeping in the engine room alongside that Kallenberg engine, which is probably why I don't have very good hearing anymore. But the only warm place on the darn boat. And we got in here in May, middle of May, and there was snow on the ground. Now this is a picture of Leonard Seeberger. An older gentleman, Ole Sandstrom from the island on the Nichevo, the first steel Nichevo. And these gals, we've never been able to find out who they are. Now I guarantee you, if you can, for each one you can name, you get a free ferry boat ride. Because we put this out on Facebook, we've talked to the Seeberger family, and everybody knows Ole Sandstrom and Leonard, but nobody knows who the gals are. So take a good look. If you see anybody that you recognize, we'd really like to know about it. This is another picture of the Nichevo. While Mr. Seeberger owned it, tied up to the Bayfield dock. You can see the wooden planks on the dock. Those planks on the dock, the island dock, was wood plank too. Would occasionally get a little ripe, and every now and then a car or truck would put a wheel through the dock, and then we'd jack it up and put another plank down. But those planks look pretty good, actually. Notice there was no chain gate across the stern. You know, just hoped that they had a break. You know. Now this was about the time in 1958 when Harry Nelson purchased Leonard Seeberger's operation and took over with his family operating the Nichevo. And for 12 years, the Nelson family and the Russell family competed. And so the GarHow and the Nichevo started out in competition here. That the two ferry companies were running when things started to really change in the 60s on Madeline Island and Bayfield. I often think about that a lot. Why we did the development and the proposed developments seemed so awesome at the time, and seemed so, you know, there was so much controversy and so forth. People were frightened and people were elated, and you know, it was just a crazy time. But I think we came out of the 50s when this was a pretty depressed area up here. There was not a whole lot going on. People were basically surviving, but and along came the 60s, and a fellow by the name of Ted Gary decided, we'd been a long time summer residents on the island, decided with his wife that they wanted to make a huge commitment to recreational development on the island with a big golf course that you see today, the marina, a game farm, a couple of restaurants, the clubhouse, and one called the Pub, which is still there. And he actually owned a beach club at around the same time. enlarged the airport on the island, so it supposedly would take a Learjet and set up a lot of lots around the golf course, and so it was a pretty heady time. There was a lot of construction going on, a lot of people working, huge number of people from the mainland going over to work over there on all this construction. The other thing that was going on at that time was Big Bay State Park was established, and there was a lot of publicity in Milwaukee Journal about that, and in different papers, and so the area was getting a lot of publicity there. But the white elephant in the room was the announcement that there was going to be a national park, that Gaylord Nelson was proposing the Apostle Islands National Lakeshore. And so that, although it didn't, went into the 70s before it was actually started development, and I think Nixon approved it in 1974, something like that. But it was big news. And the other one that was big in Bayfield was there was a big push to build a marina in Bayfield. Sailboats were coming in. There were a lot of people, with their talk about the Apostle Islands National Lakeshore, people felt that Bayfield was ready for a marina. And I think on every one of those issues, 50% of the people were in favor of it, 50% of them were opposed. So you could get a good argument on either one of them, any place. So Julian and I had a lot of fun talking about these things. That's a little shot of Big Bay State Park. And there's Julian and President Kennedy, who flew over the islands. Up in the left-hand corner, there's kind of a cute little park ranger. I think she might be sitting right over here.
Sorry, Sue.
Good picture of Captain Julian, who was also, I think, the mayor at that time. In 1962, I think we're all trying to figure out how are you going to expand our businesses and keep up with all that's going on. And in 1962, Harry Nelson's family had the Nichevo 2, the first on-off loading ferry built at Fraser Shipyard. And it was also a pretty good ice boat. And here it's being christened in Madeline Island. That's Harry, and that Doris, his wife. And that's Harry's sister-in-law, Joan Nelson. And there's the Nichevo on the run. The original Nelson colors are on her down here. It was green and with a white hull. She could handle 10 cars at that time. I say at that time because nowadays that 10-car ferry can probably get 7 on the size of the vehicles that we see coming down. In 1966, the Russell family decided that they better get in the act too, so they had a ferry called the Island Queen built at Fraser Shipyard. That's a picture of her in the yard. And she was designed to carry 15 cars, and was also a pretty darn good ice boat. And Island Queen leads the ice breaking to date. It's a picture of her coming into the harbor. This is a picture from 1970 when the ferry company had just merged, the spring of 1970. And that's Harry Nelson there, and of course that's me and my father, Howard. This guy over here is a fellow named Don Terry from Washburn. He had just sold his health insurance for employees, which neither company had been able to afford to do before that. All right, but anyway, Metropolitan Life wanted this picture for their magazine, so got the new owners together. Anyway, to get back what I said before, I think what really pushed these two companies to get together was as in the later 1960, the Ted Geary development on Madeline Island started to sour a bit. He and his wife got a little bit tired of the whole thing, I guess, and they sold their interest to a company called Leisure Living Communities from out in Boston, and turned out that they were probably more like Florida swampland real estate people. The first thing they did was laid out 2,000 lots around that golf course property. And remember, Madeline Island had no zoning at that time. It had no sewer system, and these people were trying to sell these lots. They didn't care if there was a sewer system or not. If you bought the lot, you were worried about. So we were concerned about what was going to happen here, and we felt that as one company would be in a stronger position to deal with whatever came down the road. And eventually they went broke. After the new company merged, a few years down the road, early 1970s, we started to explore options to try to move the ferry landing from down by front of the Bayfield Inn, which is where we were operating out of, to someplace else, because one of the things we knew the state park was going in on the island. That was going to increase traffic. We knew that the national park was probably going to increase traffic into Bayfield. And our cars were backing up Main Street and blocking traffic up to Morty's on some days. It was very crowded down there. It wasn't until 1976 that the Booth property on the south side of Washington Avenue came up for sale, and Boudin's approached us because they had owned it at that time, and we were able to buy that property. And that's from this dock on over. I'll just show you this quickly. In 1997, Bodine sold us this property on this site. The storm came through just before we bought the property. The one that sank the Fitzgerald, I'm trying to think, was that around 1974? Anybody remember that? Anyway, it really seriously damaged the city dock in Bayfield, but this is what happened to the Booth property. And the building that's left standing there is the herring shed. It's the one, the big blue building that we've rebuilt down there. But that was a horrendous storm, and it knocked a hole right through the Bayfield City dock. So these are the buildings of the Booth property that we've been able to maintain and save, and we spent a lot of time and resources getting them up to date. They're great old buildings. We love the history of them. We're very proud of the fact that we've been able to keep them and actually make use of them. So they're not they're kind of being used as what they were originally were. Again, these are the three boats that Madeline and Ferry Line carried up until 1980. In 1984, we built the 20-car ferry Madeline. It was built over in Washburn, and it was designed to fit the new 150-ton lift in Washburn. And it's not an ice boat, but it will run through a couple inches ice, but not very much. Then the 1990s rolled around, and things were going pretty strong. And I don't know if any of you remember the late 90s. There was the tech stocks where, you know, if you bought some of these tech stocks, they were basically weren't worth a darn as far as assets, but on paper, they had, their market value just went crazy, and people were getting rich, on paper, buying these stocks. So the economy was really booming right along, and those three old ferries, the GarHow, the Island Queen, and the Madeline, were struggling to keep up with the traffic. And I know Robin always reminds me that, what year was it, 1999? Was our busiest traffic year up until like last year, the year before, And so it's always saying, oh gosh, we're really doing pretty well. Well, 1999 was the busiest year. But we finally did just inch over that. So, it's hard to believe that we did that traffic with those three smaller boats. But anyway, the Bayfield, we thought we better do something. So around 1999, we purchased that boat from Lake Champlain Transportation Company. And we took it to Toledo and over the winter, and we had ramps put on it and a little shipyard there. And we did some other work on the boat. We sent some of our crew members down over the winter. We had an apartment there, and got to know Toledo pretty well. And then in the spring of 2000, she came up here. It's been a great boat for us. First true double-ender we had, which has 2 engine rooms, 1 on each end, and 2 a prop on each end. And it is, it doubled our capacity for vehicles by 40%. Well, then when you look back at this era, there were the ups and downs, and we kind of went into a kind of a slump period of, I was an economics major in college, so that's why I kind of get caught up, I think, sometimes with this stuff. But in 2000, the tech stocks crashed. A lot of people, even some of my good friends who should have known better, lost a lot of money. The 9/11 attack hit 2001. We got into a couple long wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Gas prices started to rise dramatically. Real estate market started to slump. Lehman Brothers went in 2008. Big banks, insurance companies, auto industries around 2010 were in big trouble. So that, is not a time when a lot of people want to take vacations and buy summer homes and boat rides and a lot of things. So a lot of businesses in this area, including ours, had to really cut back a little bit, run as efficiently as we could, and just wait for this thing to get over with. And it took quite a while. I think it was probably about 3 years ago when we finally started to see things turn up. And the last 3 years have been really, really pretty good. Of course, the gas prices are a lot better too. Well, here's a little shot of kind of what we're doing these days. One of our employees the other day said, we've been running for over 700 straight days. I said, you gotta be kidding, and then I realized he's right. We ran all last winter, we ran all this winter, and the last 25 years, we've seen, I think we ran 5 or 6 times all winter, and several other times we probably could have run all winter. We came within like 2 or 3 weeks or something like that. Previous to that, we never ran all winter. And it's, sometimes I think we're a test case for climate change. But it's tough on our equipment because we do get ice. Even though we're running all winter, you look out there today and they're running through ice. It just shifts back and forth. It doesn't get strong enough to really drive on or anything, but it's there. We keep a much larger crew on in the wintertime, and it's hard on our maintenance, and ridership is pretty limited in the winter. So, it's a bit of a challenge. But we've always been committed to keep that ferry operation open as long as we can until the conditions are right for the wind sled or ice travel from the island, and we will keep that commitment. Here's another pretty good picture of what the last couple of days before freeze-up looks like. You see all those Islanders' cars parked there. They're filling up the lots, and the school bus is down there. It looks like a pretty darn cold morning. That was a few years ago, but certainly wasn't this winter. Okay, getting pretty close to the end here, but in 1987, the Bayfield School District included Madeline Island. Before that, Madeline Island was part of the Ashland School District. Since that time, we've had a contract with the Ashland School District to transport the school kids back and forth every day. And the rest of times they go on the ice, and the Ferry Line and the school district and the town of LaPointe have a 3-way agreement where we split the subsidy of the wind sled, which would not be possible otherwise. We also have a contract with the U.S. Mail, FedEx, and UPS. We employ about 15 to 20 people year-round. We have about 30 to 35 people employed in the shoulder months, and we're up close to 50 people in the summertime. Most of those are mainlanders. We have another picture of the one, sir. We have plans for a new ferry in the works. It's in the early stages of planning. We're getting information from all sorts of places about what kind of ferry boat do we want. Is it going to be a double-ender like the Bayfield, or is it going to be a on-off loader like the Madeline? But one thing we know for sure, it's got to be ice capable. And so we want it to, it's also got to be a boat that will handle summer traffic. So we're balancing a lot of things. So it's a few years off, but we're looking forward to that. I'm just about at the end here, but I wanted to take the opportunity to thank Don Albrecht, and I know he's down in Florida right now getting some sunshine, but Don's been our photographer to go to for many years, and we've used his photos in our brochures and advertising, and he's meant a lot to us. He's a great guy, and wish him well. I'd like to take also this opportunity to say that we've had a really good run for about 47 years, and it wouldn't be possible without the great employees that we had during this time, and I want to thank them for their service, which made it all possible. The last thing is just our mission statement, and just read it quickly. It says, Madeline Island Ferry Line will provide quality transportation and related services to meet the present and future needs of Madeline Island residents and visitors in an efficient, profitable, and safe and dependable manner. The company's mission includes the premise that it will be a respected corporate citizen and a sensitive employer. Madeline Island Ferry Line will provide positive cultural, environmental, and economic impact to the island and Bayfield communities. Thank you. Any questions for Bob and I? We'll be glad to take them.
We must have covered everything.
I think you're ready to go.